What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. Today we are talking about the best bench options for our FPL squads. Not necessarily the core of a squad, but a very important thing to think about, especially as we get closer to the game week 1 deadline. In my opinion, you should spend as cheap as possible, but also you do need some playing players on the bench, preferably. So in this video, I'm going to go through what my strategy is really quickly, and then position by position. So goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, and forwards are all included in this video. Not one player is more than 4.5 million, and a lot of them are 4 million as well that we want to talk about today. So if you find it useful, or if you find this video interesting, please do give it a like, and please do subscribe if you're new around here. I want to hit 100k before the end of the season. We are close to 75k at the time of recording this. It would be amazing if you could help me out by hitting that subscribe button. Otherwise, let's jump into it. So first of all, I just want to quickly talk about my kind of strategy, what the expectation should be and that kind of thing. So first of all, I want to go as cheap as possible. You'll very rarely find me, at least at the start of the season. It does sometimes change throughout the season. Obviously, we'll talk about that further down the road. But right now, we're just trying to build game week 1 squads. I want to go as cheap as possible, so you will not find anyone more than 4.5 million on my bench. There's talks about people going for the likes of Matt Ritchie or Souček for 5 million. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, and perhaps up until the first wild card, that could be a play, especially with Man United players not playing. So you could have Souček, bench a Man United player, then in game week 2 reverse that, as Souček would be on your bench at 5 million. I don't have an issue with that, but my preference is to go as cheap as possible because I want the most amount of points and the most amount of money on my pitch in my first 11 playing week in, week out. So I try and go as cheap as possible. You don't have to have a full playing squad or a full playing bench of players. It's okay to maybe have a £4 million defender or a £4 million goalkeeper that isn't going to play, because at the end of the day, the chances of you needing all 3 players on your bench in one game week is very low. It does happen, but not very often. If you've got a good core of 11 players that are going to play, that are mostly nailed on, are going to get minutes every game, but you're not going to need your bench that often. Now, this season's a little bit different because of everything going on in the world. There could be postponements out of the blue. We could have players missing games for whatever reason, and perhaps you'll need to call on your bench a little bit more often. But the fact that the Premier League, at the time of recording this, are thinking about revoting the bench rule to potentially let you have 5 subs, will probably mean that there's less chance of a player not coming on at all, and then again, less chance for your bench to have to come into play. So for me, you don't have to have a full playing bench. I definitely would want 1 or 2 players, especially outfield players that are going to play, but I don't think all 4 players have to play, because if your player on your pitch is going to play week in, week out, you're never going to need that bench option anyway, especially when it comes to like goalkeepers, because they very rarely get rotated. And I want to go as cheap as possible, but you have to set your expectations. If you're spending that little money, very rare they're going to score big points. It does happen sometimes, and there could be a really valuable player that we don't yet know about. I'm going to talk about some of the best options as we know it right now. So there will sometimes be players that are only 4.5 million. We've seen it in previous years. Wan-Bissaka at Crystal Palace, Lundstram at Sheffield United, that have scored big points for a very cheap price. But usually you're looking at maybe 1 or 2 points off the bench as and when needed, which is why I prefer spending that money on the first 11. So that's kind of my general strategy. Go as cheap as possible. You don't necessarily have to have a full playing bench, although if you can afford it, it's not a bad idea at all. And you have to have realistic expectations. These players are not going to be the ones scoring most of your points every single week. Okay, so let's start off with goalkeepers. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about what your strategy should be overall, like whether you should have 2 playing goalkeepers or not. I'm really going to talk about the options if you've chosen not to have a playing goalkeeper, basically. So if you want to spend 4 million, these are basically the 3 from what I can see that are almost like the standout options, even though there's not any certainty that any of these will play. So Button, for example, at Brighton, if you're going for Matt Ryan as your goalkeeper, Button is a great backup because you get 2 goalkeepers for 8.5 million. Ryan will play, and if he doesn't play, it should be Button. Now, we'll have to keep an eye on pre-season if any other goalkeepers come in or maybe are going to be the number 2 there. There's also been talk about maybe Button going to another team. I think I've seen him linked with West Brom. So if that happens, would he be the backup there? Would he be the number 1 keeper? Obviously, if he is the number 1 keeper, if you can have a playing keeper for 4 million, brilliant. But I'm not sure we're going to be that lucky. But ultimately, if you're going for Ryan right now, Button is probably the best backup. Now, Aston Villa are the other interesting choice because Rayner's not there anymore. Heaton is still injured. It doesn't look like he's going to be able to start the season. He might not be out for that long, which is definitely worth considering. He's 4.5 million. He may start after like a few weeks or something like that. And it's also worth pointing out that Aston Villa are constantly getting linked with goalkeepers as well. So they might just buy someone new. And I'm sure any new transfer that comes in, unless it's a complete unknown player, they're going to be 4.5 million as well. So the chances of us getting a 4 million playing keeper right now look pretty slim. If Villa don't buy a goalkeeper, and they don't, and Heaton's not fit to start, which it doesn't sound like he will be, then Steer or Nyland will play. Now, we know that Nyland got a bit of a chance last year. There was obviously that kind of infamous goal that wasn't a goal where he caught it against Sheffield United, was behind the line, didn't get given. But if you talk to a lot of Aston Villa fans, if Heaton's not fit, they don't necessarily think that he will start the season. They think it could be Steer instead. So unless we 100% know that, I would probably steer clear of trying to play these goalkeepers. If we get an inkling that it's Steer or it's Nyland, then great. We put them on the bench as the 4 million keeper. And until Heaton is back, then they will play. But ultimately, with these 4 million goalkeepers, there's not going to be one that's going to start week in, week out as it stands. Button is a great backup if you're going for Matt Ryan, because if Matt Ryan gets injured, you can bring Button in. And with Steer and Nyland right now, we don't 100% know which one is going to play if Heaton's not there. And obviously, if they buy someone else, then that goalkeeper will probably play instead. So expectations here should be that they're not going to play. They're literally in your team to enable more value to be spent elsewhere, and it's as simple as that. Okay, so defenders up next. It gets a bit more interesting, because if you can get a £4 million playing defender, that's like the ultimate dream in FPL, because they might get you some good points, the odd clean sheet off your bench, but you'd also get great value because it's better than spending 4.5 on a defender. You get that 0.5 to spend elsewhere, whether it's an attack or whatever it might be. And usually this is the position where you sometimes get a bit of value. So looking at the main names here, I think Mitchell and Ferguson at Crystal Palace you would have seen talked about a lot. There's Johnson at West Ham as well, and Branthwaite at Everton. Now let's start actually at the bottom of this list. Branthwaite started quite a bit at the end of last season, but they got Mina, Keane, Holgate as well. If they're all fit, I just don't see that he fits in somewhere, and they could even buy a new centre-back as well. So for me, that is kind of wishful thinking. I personally don't think he's going to play at all. Maybe if they pick up a few injuries, he'll suddenly become an option at 4 million, but as it stands right now, I just don't see it. So if anyone's looking at picking him, I think you're basically buying a non-playing defender. Now, Everton fans, of course, if I'm wrong, put a comment below and let me know why. But I just don't think it's going to be the case. I think it's going to be too soon for him. If in pre-season again, we see him get a lot of starts and all the other players are fit and available as well, then maybe he's an option. But right now, as it stands, it's not looking good. Johnson at West Ham. So there's a lot of West Ham fans that think he will be their right back going into this season, unless they buy a new one, of course. The other option is Fredericks. Now, there was some rumours I saw on Twitter that he was maybe injured, and funnily enough, before I made this video, I put a tweet out about him, and then about 5 minutes later, West Ham released a team for pre-season, and Fredericks was playing. That doesn't necessarily mean that he is the number one, because in pre-season, they chop and change teams around quite a lot, just to, bring players up to match fitness and stuff like that. So a lot of West Ham fans do not rate Fredericks, and they think Johnson, if he gets a start, he'll be able to cement his place, basically. And he looks like one of the shots for a 4 million defender. But again, we don't know. My preference for pre-season usually is not really to take form into account. It's more to see who gets the most minutes and what formations and stuff the teams play. The one pre-season game you're always looking for is the last one before their first competitive match, because that's the one where you hope they would mostly play a full-strength team. Because if you look at the West Ham teams that have been put out, there's some first-team players from last year, there's some that aren't, then they switch and play another game, and then they kind of mix and match again. So it's hard to see. Like, Antonio got benched in the one today, and Haller's playing, but then Bowen's on the bench as well, and so is Souček. And you know that Bowen and Souček are 100% nailed on in that team, or pretty much. So is Antonio suddenly a bench option? Does that mean Johnson's not playing? Not necessarily. It's hard to tell. But there's a lot of faith in Johnson from West Ham fans that I've talked to. So he is worth a look for sure. And obviously, again, keep an eye on those pre-season games. Are going to be really important. Crystal Palace is where most of the love was for. Ferguson in particular, they've signed him on a free, I think it was actually. He was on loan to West Brom last year. Or he was at West Brom last year, sorry, not on loan. And they signed him. I got that wrong earlier in the season. But they signed him on a free. And again, Crystal Palace fans, 100% he's going to be their right back this season. But he's got a knee injury. He hasn't been playing. He hasn't been training yet, I don't think. So it looks like he's going to miss the start of the season. So Joel Ward is going to play as well. Now, again, whether the fans know exactly what the manager is thinking, it's hard to tell. But the fans, especially when they all think the same thing, are usually a good source of information. So if they're telling me that Ferguson's going to be the right back, then I kind of believe that. Maybe even a little bit more so than Johnson. So you could put Ferguson in your team as a £4 million defender who can't yet play. And then when he is fully fit, he comes into your team, he's then playing, you've got him in, you haven't had to make a transfer. That could be a tactic that you employ. The problem is you don't know how long that's going to be. How long till he plays? Even when he's fit, will it take a few games for him to start, basically week in, week out? He is young, of course, so he's going to have the fitness to do that, but he needs to get up to that fitness in the first place. So Ferguson, you could do that, play him and then wait for him to be fit. And Mitchell is the other one. It's kind of the opposite. He's basically playing. He started in pre-season again today, ahead of Van Arnold, because Van Arnold is injured, but he's only injured till like October, so potentially only gives you 3 or 4 game weeks of Mitchell. Now, if you're going to wildcard early, potentially you could put him into your team, get a few game weeks out of him, then when you wildcard, you can switch over to whichever other £4 million defenders are playing, and which, after 1 or 2 weeks, barring injuries, we might get to find that out. So Mitchell is probably going to start the season from what we can see. Not 100%, of course. They could, put someone else there instead. But it looks like he'll start. He did end the season as well when Van Arnold got injured. So right now he looks our best bet at a £4 million playing defender, but probably not for the long term. Ferguson, probably not going to start the season, but for long term is probably the best £4 million bet. So I like this position. I will probably choose one of these regardless, even if they're not going to play, just to use money elsewhere. And I might have like a second defender on the bench, like at 4.5 million, to make sure I've got someone that's going to play. But a few options here, definitely for you to consider. So the Holy Grail, the £4.5 million midfielder. Last year we had Todd Cantwell. Great pick for 4.5 million. This year we're not so lucky. There's not really, looking through the list of who might play and who might not play, there isn't too many options. And even the ones that do play, probably not going to get you many points. Most of the players on this list haven't got many assists last year, haven't got many goals, and that's between them, let alone individually. So I always like the £4.5 million midfielder slot because it's the cheapest one and it gives you money to spend elsewhere. Like I've already said, without going into too much detail, Souček, Matt Ritchie, other £5 million midfielders, if you've got that extra to spend or that's your strategy, you can happily do that. Personally, I prefer having a 4.5 million and spending that 0.5 million basically elsewhere in my first 11. These are the players I come up with. So Gordon at Everton I think is going to be too good to be true. The most attacking probably out of this whole list, and if he does play, he's going to be a great option to have on our bench. The chances of that seem a bit slim at this point. Not week in, week out. He might get some minutes off the subs bench and stuff like that, but I don't think we're going to see a situation without injuries where he starts week in, week out. Even if he could get like 4 or 5 games in a row, that would be great. It just doesn't look like that's going to happen. Stevens is like the most boring choice of all. Again, without transfers coming in and stuff like that, he's going to play pretty much week in, week out, 90 minutes. But he's going to get you 1 or 2 points. 2 if he plays, 3 maybe if they get the odd clean sheet, because obviously he's listed as a midfielder, and 1 if he gets a yellow card. You're not going to get much more than that. He's barely scored a goal or got an assist in the last few seasons. So he plays. If he needs to come on and get you a couple of points, probably, but that's about it. Basuma did start. I think he was playing at the end of last season, not necessarily as nailed on as Stevens, but he could be in that Brighton team, or about as nailed on as you can be under Potter. And maybe a little bit more attacking, likes to take a shot, so it could be a better bet than Stevens if we think he's going to play every single week. But there is still that kind of umming and ahhing about whether that's going to be the case. But again, at Brighton, could be an okay option. Again, talking about setting expectations, you should not be expecting many goals or assists here. Anguissa, so he wasn't at Fulham last year because he was on loan. I think it was at Villarreal. He's had a pretty good season there by all means, like from looking at reports and stuff like that. So could he come back in now and be in the Fulham side full time? Again, I looked back on Transfer Market about how many goals and assists he got at Villarreal. Not very many at all. I think it was 1 assist, no goals. So again, you should not be expecting many attack and returns, but he could be an option at Fulham. I'll hopefully be doing a Fulham video over on Fantasy Football Scout, so we'll find out more about whether he's going to be starting week in, week out. And then Reed is another one. So he's at Southampton, Harrison Reed. He's not going to be. He might not be there at the start of the season. If he is, he's not going to play, so he's not an option. But it looks like he might get a move to Fulham himself, where he was on loan last year. So either that'll be on loan or a permanent move. And he did play a lot of minutes when he wasn't injured last year as well. So again, assuming that he comes back in and gets his place from the side that he was in last year, then again, he should play quite a few minutes week in, week out. But again, the problem is not many goals or assists. So if you're someone that's going to rely on that bench position or a lot, or if you want to rotate so that if one of your midfielders has a bad game, you can play someone off your bench instead, then maybe go for someone like Souček instead for that extra 0.5 million. Yes, he's got bad fixtures at the start, but it's not a position, the bench is not a position you want to keep spending transfers on. So if you want someone a little bit better, you got to Souček. Otherwise, you stay at 4.5 million. Right now, if I was picking, I'd maybe go Anguissa if I think he's going to start, or Bissouma. But otherwise, Stevens is just a boring pick that's going to play week in, week out. Not very exciting. You're going to get a couple of points here or there, and that is about it. Dream is always having a £4.5 million forward that's going to play. Very rarely happens. For whatever reason, these players never get priced at 4.5. Not any that are going to start. Like, you'd get it in midfield, but not up front. I guess for the reason that FPL just don't want them scoring too many points and making it too easy to build a squad. So there's hardly any options this year. I think there's 4 altogether. Even the likes of Connolly, who was at Brighton last year, he's gone up in price now, so he's not an option at 4.5. So Davis and Brewster are the 2 that I've picked out for two. Well, one reason for each. Davis has got very high ownership. Now, again, don't have any issue for anyone that's playing kind of a 4-4-2 or a 3-5-2, whatever it is, and wants a cheap playing forward option. Like, at the end of the day, you just pick one. A bit like the non-playing defenders. If you want to pick a non-playing forward, absolutely no problem with that at all. Davis is very high ownership because he did get some minutes last year, but I can't imagine he's going to start the season. Even when he did play, I think 500 or 600 minutes, he got 1 assist, I think, no goals. I thought he looked okay at times, but in terms of finishing, not the best by any stretch. Probably why he's 4.5 million. And I just don't think he's going to start the season in that Villa team. If anything, I feel like they need to buy a striker. Whether or not they will, we'll have to wait and see. But Davis is not really going to be the one. The one that really interests me is Brewster at Liverpool. Now, again, if you look at pre-season, he's actually playing quite well for Liverpool. But we all know he's not going to start the season. It's going to be Salah, Mane, Firmino front line. That they might buy some more players as backup. Like they had Shaqiri, for example, that could play on the wings. We know Oxlade-Chamberlain can play there sometimes, but he's injured at the moment. So they got options there. Brewster's not going to be one of them. Even if he stays at Liverpool, he's not going to get any minutes. But he is being heavily linked with a loan move somewhere else. And even better, in the Premier League. Now, Sheffield United is one team I've seen him strongly linked with. It's tough to say whether he would go there and start week in, week out. Sheffield United, very good defensively last year. Not necessarily blessed with strikers that can score goals at will. Is Brewster going to be good enough? There's a lot of hype around him, but is he going to be able to come into a Premier League team and start, doing really well week in, week out? I don't know yet. Liverpool fans have a lot of expectations for this kid, a bit like Greenwood at Man United. So perhaps he will when he gets a run of starts in a team. If he gets moved to a Premier League team and it does look like he's going to get minutes, he's a great option. He's so, having a £4.5 million playing forward is so good that I would maybe even switch formations. So I wouldn't overthink formations too much, but if I'm playing a 3-4-3, but Brewster's at Sheffield United and I think he's going to play week in, week out, I'd maybe shift to a 3-5-2 because at times, if Sheffield United got a really good fixture, I could play Brewster, maybe bench someone else. Or if I've got my team, I'm playing my 11, but one of them gets injured during the game or before the game or something like that, or picks up an injury before the game week deadline, then Brewster can come in. Or maybe they don't play for whatever reason, they get fully rested for 90 minutes. Brewster can then come in. So it is a bit of a game changer when you have someone like that that's going to play. That is really, apart from the £4 million playing defender, this is the second kind of FPL dream. So unlike midfielders, if Brewster's going to get game time, you'd expect him to get way more points than just the odd 1 or 2 pointer every single week. But it really does depend on that loan move. So keep an eye out pre-season. If he gets a move to another Premier League squad, obviously you have to consider what other strikers are already there. Is he just going to be a backup or is he going to play week in, week out? But someone like Sheffield United, you've got to think they've got to give someone else a chance. Maybe it's because they don't create enough chances, but the strikers they got there are not kind of incredible strikers. They're decent enough. I think Brewster could come in, a lot of confidence, young kid, no worries in the world, no kind of fear or anything like that. He could absolutely smash it. So keep an eye on him. He's one of the exciting £4 million bench players that I'm strongly considering if he moves from Liverpool. But that's it for this one then. Lots of bench options considered and talked about there. Let me know in the comments below if I've missed any, especially like £4.5 million midfielders. I know there's going to be others that are playing, but I feel like I talked about some of the best options. Forwards, defenders, goalkeepers, I don't expect too many others that I haven't talked about to play. Like Douglas at Leeds not going to play or anything like that. None of the forwards, none of the goalkeepers from what I can see right now. My bench will almost certainly be a £4 million goalkeeper, one £4 million defender, either Johnson at West Ham or Mitchell at at Palace. Maybe Ferguson. I'll have to wait and see what the kind of injury is like and whether he's going to get back to speed quickly. A £4.5 million midfielder, and that's basically it, along with another £4.5 million defender as well. So I do want some playing players on my bench. I don't want a complete 4 on the bench that don't play at all. So that's my strategy. Let me know what you think. If you did enjoy it, give it a like. Please do subscribe if you are new around here and you haven't hit that button already. I know a lot of people are clicking it on the home screen, not hitting that subscribe button. It would really help me out. Love to hit 75k by Monday, but even better to hit 100k by the end of the season, or even close to the start of the season. Who knows? It could happen. If you want to support the channel even further, I do have Patreon. You can click the link in the description below. There's extra content over there as well as all the content I'm producing on YouTube. I do hope you're enjoying it. I'll leave it there for this Sunday. Have a great end to your weekend, and I will catch you tomorrow for another video. Cheers all.